Morning, good afternoon. How is everything?
I'm doing very, very well. I'm glad you're doing well, it sounds like.
I'm doing great. I'm super blessed.
Excellent. I love that. So, today we're talking about technical program management, you being the CEO, founder, and chief guru of the Technical Program Management Institute. You love topic of technical program management, but we're talking about technical program managers in banking and finance, and you got a lot of experience there.
Indeed, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here and really looking forward to a conversation today. Um, and this is a very interesting and sensitive topic for me because I've worked a little bit in the space over the last few years. And the other part that's very interesting is beyond just my experience in this is also how well all of us as human beings, as individuals, interact with these like entities, right? How
I
many
know.
people
I got a couple of questions for that coming up because I'm very
yeah,
intrigued. The
yeah,
fact that it's so IT centric for all the services that they provide, and
it's
we're
incredible.
demanding more and more services to engage these systems and these
it, it
this
it's in,
industry.
it's absolutely incredible, David, because you think about it, right? Like, and this is why IT in a banking or a finance industry is so critical,
It's critical.
because you obviously have the core banking capabilities, your deposit, your banking, your accounting ledger. You have your digital capabilities, your mobile applications, your online banking, your website, your call centers. You have all of those, but then you have these other platforms that these banks and financial systems operate on, right? Your lending platforms, your KYCs, your AIML, right? You have your analytics capabilities, you have your treasury and finance, you have risk, and you have enterprise platforms like customer management, CRM,
Yeah.
cybersecurity. The way I've always thought of banking and finance, this is why I think this is such a good topic for everybody who wants to be a TPM or wants to pursue this, is important to realize a bank is not one system,
Yeah.
right? It's a thousand systems that are constantly trying to agree on who is the customer, how much money do they have,
Yeah.
and whether that money is safe or not.
I
Right?
always laugh and say basically a bank is like an IT company that just chose to do banking because
I
really it's
love
one
it.
big gigantic IT company.
I love it. I love it. And David, like if you think about it, as you slice it through, right? Think about one of the some of the larger banks that exist in the country, right? You think about like a Capital One or a JP Morgan Chase or a Bank of
Mhm.
America, right? Yes, today, if you ask anyone who works there, they think of themselves and they pride themselves about, hey, we are a technology company, right? Which is exactly in line with what you're saying.
They
Banks,
are a technology company. That's better,
yeah,
even better than saying IT. So here's the first question for you.
yeah.
What are the unique IT / technical challenges that banking and finance bring? What are the challenges in that industry that are unique
So,
to them?
so very interesting. I think some of those will still draw parallels to other industries, but like one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing in banking right now is this combination of hybrid between legacy and modernization, right? So most large banks still run mission critical workflows, mission critical applications on a combination of some mainframe systems, some COBOL systems, some batch jobs that were written back in like the 70s, 80s.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And
The old code.
it's incredible, right? And now you combine all of this with what's happening in today's day and age with Gen AI and like 50, more than 70% of the code being written with AI assisted development tools, right? So it's this blend of how do we continue to keep the lights on with this legacy that we have, but then also continue to modernize and continue to wow the customers, right? So imagine like, and this is a program that we worked on a couple of years back, modernizing a legacy servicing platform that does lending, right?
Yeah.
But you still have to be able to do your daily transactions, right? So how do you do this? That's a very unique challenge in itself, and this is why I think, even though the whole concept of technical program management initiated more on the more tech first companies, the Googles, the Microsofts of the world, banking was one of the first industries to start adoption of this
This is
role.
where it's really going to grow and mature as a profession
Yes,
because it's so needed,
100%,
right? So then we
100%.
ask you that, how does a TPM skill set, how does that TPM skill, why does it, or how does it fit so well to support these unique challenges?
Yeah, and this is another very important element in the intersection of why, as I was saying, right? Like the role obviously started more on the West Coast side, the large tech first companies. The Within a bank, as you were saying, right? It's a large tech company essentially, and you have to deal with a variety of different roles. You have your compliance, you have your risk, you have your finance, all of those different marketing, sales. Like, it's a very competitive landscape too. If you
Yep.
think about non-tech companies, most non-tech companies, their competition is slightly limited, right? So, for instance, if I were to talk about healthcare, most of my healthcare TAM will be limited to the geographic location that my population is in, right? So, if I'm a children's hospital and based in Seattle, my target audience is going to be the most likely, the majority of my population is going to be the children in Seattle. I
Yep.
will not be competing with the children population of Pennsylvania, or and
That's
maybe
right.
competing is not the right word, but
No, but
that's the
I
target
get
audience, right?
you're making a great point. They're very
Yes.
geographically fixated, right? But the
Yes.
bank isn't. I can have mom and pop bank nipping at my heels everywhere.
Every day, every single day, because you're translating across the country.
That's what
Many
kind of Silicon National Bank or Silicon, even though they failed, that's what they were trying to do, right? Go
Absolutely.
across the ge- break geographic barriers and cause havoc. They caused havoc, but in a whole other way. But keep
Can
going.
you
That's a
believe
great
that's
point.
been what, like 4.5, 5 years at this point
It's
since
crazy.
SVB went
I
down?
just said it and thought, my God, that's been a while back.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And now you think about that's what's at stake, David, right? So that's why this role of a technical program manager. That's why you're seeing Capital One Bank, was it 2021, 2022, so about 4 years ago, came out and said, oops, no more agile coaches, no
Oops.
more agile
They
scrum
actually said that. They
masters.
said, oops. They said, oops.
That's it, right? Like a complete change, a
Yep.
paradigm shift. And they've
Yeah.
always been the leader when it comes to this type of innovation or adoption of culture, right? So we work with several people who've been a part of these teams over there. We hear stories about this all the time in the news. And what you're really trying to do is bring somebody who can talk to engineering, who understands architecture, not just coordinates meeting, but understands system design, can then tie in cybersecurity, risk, compliance, legal, put on that product hat from time to time. So you're really driving outcomes. Like, think about this, right? Let's say you're in a digital account opening program for SVB, right?
Yep.
Now your TPM, you're connecting your mobile app dev teams with your KYC vendors, with your fraud teams, with your core banking teams, with your branch operations. All of this requires somebody who understands the technology underneath. Right? They're
Yeah.
just
It's
far
really
more better
wild.
equipped.
And that's interesting. As you start thinking about the reason banks are so, I mean, the heavy regulatory aspect of it, right? The FDIC requirements associated with it, the whole concept of treasury and how treasury is important and tied to regulatory.
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think sometimes we don't really understand how deep and wide the structured processes are that they're required to follow, or else they get in deep trouble. And the TPM has to work across all those just to come up with some new way for me to visualize my mutual fund,
Yeah.
or my new way to pull a little cash out of that mutual fund, or pull a little cash out of a CD if I can, or buy a fraction of a stock.
Yeah.
All these different things, and they got to go through. I can only imagine. So let me ask you this question: how come the agile way of working ultimately didn't really work in banking and finance, or is that too broad of a statement?
Yeah, I think that might be a little broad, David, but we're also seeing this, right? Like Capital One was the first one that went out and had that oops moment. I wouldn't call it an oops moment in hindsight, right? But more like
No,
an
you're right.
aha
No,
moment.
it's great. It was a great. It is. It's just
Yeah,
like that's really what happened. Somebody on the ledger said, "Oh, I don't like this. It's gone."
yeah,
That's what happened.
right. And it goes back to what we've seen in the industry, right? Like, and you and I have been involved in the agile methodology for long enough. We truly believe there were some really good things that came out of it as
Absolutely.
as a methodology. I don't question it. It's the practicing, the practices, and how it became lip service, right? So think about the same example that we were talking about, the digital account opening, right? Agile works well in a teams which are product aligned, where you have customer facing digital products,
Yep.
where you have compliances embedded. But when you talk about large banks, large financial institutions, go back to the same things that you were just talking about: your risk, your compliance, your FDIC, all of those things. They're not necessarily deterrent, but they do pose a very different, unique challenge. It's
Yes.
very different than somebody coming out and saying, I want to build out a social media platform. Let's go.
That's a
Right?
lot different.
It's
Holy
very
moly! Think
different.
about that.
Right? Now think about Where this got challenged in large banks, in large financial institutes, the concept of, we had this cargo cults concept, right, where people were
Mhm.
starting to use some of these practices. We were calling it Vagile, fake
Yeah.
agile, Scrum Fall. We've heard all of these names.
They
The
weren't
teams,
thinking, they were just following the frame. And that's what Agile's not about, is that they were just following this framework.
yes, and specifically in the banking industry, what became also pretty clear, and then a lot of the partners and implementation specialists were also, in my opinion, quite responsible for this. The team started doing sprints, but funding, approvals, governance was pretty much all waterfall,
Yeah. They
right?
were. Mm-hmm.
So the architecture reviews, testing, release management, it's still happening in large waterfall gates. That's not in line with what the methodology was promoting, right? The idea was for you to have sweeping change so that you have architectural alignment. And that's why one of the 14 principles in the Agile Manifesto was, the self-evolutioning architectures,
Yeah.
right? Architectures evolve. Imagine testing a fraud
Yeah, but
platform.
really, at the end of the day, Agile is not built for that level of complexity, or it would take highly skilled practitioners who are very open to adjustment and pivot to work, because that's the utopia for an Agile professional is I follow the four guiding principles and then I act accordingly using different tools and techniques. But
100%.
we don't do that. So now let's throw
100%.
this one at you. How do TPMs now? So you're a TPM in banking, you've done that. How do TPMs, where and how do they use agile methods now, if
So,
they even do?
so agile methods are still being used, right? So whether it's Scrum or Kanban, we still have teams, organizations that use different elements of different frameworks within, like PI planning or quarterly planning. That is
Mm-hmm.
something that we see used so frequently in most large organizations.
Yep.
Great practice. Come prepared. Start thinking about release trains, regulated programs. All of those good practices still exist. Backlog prioritization still exists. So high value proposition activities, definition of done, definition of ready, all of those things exist. In banking, agile does not mean documentation. It means right documentation is produced continuously,
Mm-hmm.
not in a panic just before go live, right? Because of
Yep.
all the things that we know about, like the regulatory constraints, the compliance, the FDIC, all of these different elements require a very different level of hand holding, muscle memory almost, right? So imagine this, right? And I'll tell you this real world example. We're working with a team that was testing out a fraud platform,
Okay.
fraud
Okay.
platform, right?
Critical,
Incredible.
hugely
Right?
critical.
Imagine how
And
many
no,
of
by the way,
us,
no social media really needs to know about that too much.
yeah, right? Think about it. How many of us get a text message almost on a weekly, daily basis that says, "Have you authorized this transaction? Please click one or two." Right?
Yep.
That's what we're talking about, a fraud platform. However, the team that we were working with, they had unrealistic transaction patterns. Now, how do you train an analytics capability, a data science capability, where you're trying to create some sort of a risk score for every transaction to be able to trigger an automated notification mechanism that calls out on this fraud platform with synthetic identities, no account histories, no recollection of edge cases, right? So that's the level of depth that you start thinking about and start saying. And again, Agile by default was more about a methodology, about how you approach work. Agile
Yep.
was meant to be, Scrum in particular, has always been about trying to expose the flaws, make things more visible. That's the
Mm-hmm.
intention. It was never meant to be, here's your new SDLC, right? It was always meant to be used with best practices of your SDLC, like testing data.
It's interesting. Good points. Very good points. So let me throw this at you then. Okay. So they are using it. They're using it in combination with other techniques based on where they're operating, and you get into some complex situations like a fraud alert system, and then you've got to understand that that's not necessarily end all know all. But let me ask you this question: where do TPMs have the greatest impact on banking and financing? Why do you need to have them in this environment?
Yeah, another fantastic topic, David. As we are living in this world of AI, Gen AI, agentic AI, Google just announced Gemini Enterprise agents. platform now, as we are thinking about all of this, the speed with which we can build things today, it's rapid fire, right? Like the TPM is most valuable when the work is too technical for a traditional PM, right? And in most cases, in a bank or a finance setting, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost always too technical.
Yep.
It's almost always too dependency oriented. There are almost always too many cross functional players, too many cross functional pieces for a single engineering manager or a single PM to be able to coordinate the risk or act on it casually. Like, just think about it, right? If you have an organization, a large bank going through the core banking modernization, right? Core banking modernization. You're going from legacy deposit checking to more modern platforms. That might
Yep.
entail you might go cloud first, you might be doing a cloud migration, you might be doing digital onboarding, you might still have to integrate with your fraud, AML modernization, AML integrations. All of those things generally are so tightly knit, it's very difficult. You're almost placing yourselves at risk on a program of that magnitude by not upskilling and not having the right man for the role or the right
Mm-hmm.
woman for the job and not having the right person to be able to come out and say, here is all the different initiatives that we have in play. What can we do to empower and staff up appropriately to run this program more as an entrepreneur? Because there's so
Yep.
much risk involved.
So as you start digging into this, and you're smelling some stuff, you're seeing some stuff, you're watching things. Now, what are some of the next generation services? As long as you're not breaking an NDA, what are some next generation services that TPMs are working on in banking and finance? What are you seeing?
So I can't name anybody in particular, but
Yep.
we can certainly talk about, obviously, as we were talking about, the capabilities with Gen AI being incredibly advanced now, and there's
Yep.
a lot of innovation that's happening in this space, and you're seeing this, right? Imagine the
Mm-hmm.
experience that you and I were having when we would walk into a physical location of a bank, just the head count that we would see versus the devices that we would see, and now where we are right now, right? So we've
Yep.
already seen that evolution. There's been a lot of machine learning and data science work that's being done on AI powered fraud detection.
Okay.
The
So a lot
level
of fraud. So you're seeing a great deal of research, a great deal of TPM brain power locked into fraud.
massive, massive. If someone were to ask me today from a capabilities perspective, hey, I'm interested in becoming a TPM, specifically want to double down on the banking sector, that would be my first go-to area because that's a
Yeah, and you
very
can make
unique,
some money here because protecting from fraud protects the bank from a ton of.
massive,
So, I mean,
massive.
is there a balancing act between too much fraud protection and convenience for the customer, or is a TPM dealing with that?
And exactly that's where now the AI capabilities are coming in, David. So it was traditional data science models were simply strategically built out around risk scores. So
Hmm.
foundational parameters, being able to track, come up with an engineering mathematical model that gives you the definition of, hey, this might be a fraudulent transaction. With
Yeah,
AI capabilities, it's going a step further, especially with agentic, where it's reasoning and then it's also able to act on it. You're able to detect suspicious transactions as we were before, but we're now going to like other capabilities, mule accounts, account takeover, synthetic identity fraud. Those are the types of things that we're going really deep in right now with respect to fraud detection and capturing. So
yeah.
that's
It
just
is
one
really
area.
hard. I mean, today's world, like my wife wants to keep her name on the number of things, but I drive all the finances, and if I have
Mhm.
to work in an account with her name on it, and there's a problem, it's a nightmare. And
It
I get it.
absolutely
I get it, but I'm hopeful at some point in time they start figuring it out because just like security and IP networks, like that was always the battle, right? Too
massive.
much security slows down the IP network and then you have major performance issues. But
Yeah.
without security, so I can see this fraud thing becoming a balancing act between convenience versus protection.
Yep, security versus convenience. And that brings us to the next place where we are seeing now on the back office side, right? It's
Yeah.
about Gen AI for customer service. Like how do
Okay.
we improve our customer experience? How do we summarize calls? That's something that's been there for a while now where teams are actually
They need
trying
to
to
do a
double
better
down.
job because I do some banking and they all stink. Thankfully,
That's
I can go right to my Merrill Lynch person. I'm blessed. Guy was. It's like you're blessed. I'm blessed. I can bypass all that crap at least with Merrill Lynch BOA.
And see,
With other
that's
credit cards, I can't.
and there is a pattern, right? A consumer behavior change that's important to recognize, right? Most human beings would be a lot more comfortable picking up the phone and wanting to talk to an Omer or David,
Oh God, yes,
not not to a AI assisted bot,
that's
right?
right.
And that's a consumer pattern shift, right? That's a behavioral change that a lot of times TPMs need to be able to drive that risk. I can't tell you enough, David, how much money is being spent in banks and finance companies trying to utilize the latest technology without
You know, if the
any.
bot knew what the heck it was doing, I have no problem talking to a bot. I think the banks have a lot of room here, right? If the
Yes.
bot is got a decent human voice and it knows what it's doing, it's got flexibility, and it answers questions, I don't mind working with it.
And see, David, this is where now the next piece comes in of the pyramid, which is personalization and customer 360.
Yeah.
That is the area where we're seeing most of the organizations really double down on.
So they are
And
seeing this. Let me ask one last question. I know you got to leave a little bit here.
yeah,
What about on the customer facing side? What's the latest and greatest? I see a lot of their updates around spending patterns and the fact that they estimate, are you underspending, overspending? You know, they can give you stuff like that. You can certainly move anything and everything around as you see fit. Anything new that you're smelling out or seeing?
RTP, real-time payments. That is
Real time
probably
payments.
real-time payments. That is probably one of the most
Well, that's why
significant advancements.
Venmo and so forth kicks their butt, right? I
That's
mean,
it.
crap. It's amazing
That's
what
it.
you can do. Okay, so the
Yes,
banks are saying we've lost the Venmo. Zelle is not the end all no all. We got to fix this.
that's it. Right. We got to get into
Really?
that, like from a B2C model or a C2C model almost in,
Oh,
in
it's
this in
amazing.
this
I mean,
context, right? So
absolutely amazing. Now, let me ask this question.
yeah.
Went to New Zealand. I went to New Zealand. I cashed out 60 US dollars from New Zealand dollars, and I left with the same amount of money in my pocket.
Wow.
Everything was electronic. What are they saying about that? What's going on?
See, this is the interesting part. The
They
the
don't do checks in New Zealand, by the way. No checks.
Is that right?
No checks.
I didn't experience that. I wasn't there for very long though. So
No
um,
checks.
and see, this is the part, David. I think it's an ecosystem, right? A bank in itself is a very complex, very tightly organized ecosystem. There
Mm-hmm.
are so many moving pieces, so many moving parts, and this is where I think technical program management in banking is not just about managing timelines. That's just a smaller
Yeah,
piece.
you are starting to show a really good picture, Omer, because in order to solve these complex problems with our GDP, which, like, I think by a factor of 100 trumps New Zealand, right? So I
Yes,
get it, right? But this is what people are going to start to expect.
that's right. That's right. And now that's the part where, in a very complex, highly competitive ecosystem, this is exactly top of mind when we start talking your CIOs, your VPs who are thinking about this from a perspective. And that's why they always look at this in our conversations. Constantly, this comes up. TPM is the glue that connects architects, delivery, compliance, risk, business value in an industry where trust is the product.
Trust is
That's
the product.
that's
Yes,
the most
I
important
will.
thing.
Yes, yes.
Right?
It come Wells Fargo. I mean, it's been 3 or 4 years, but I am not going to touch Wells Fargo with a
There you
100-foot
go.
pole.
DPMs help make sure technology change happens with speed, discipline, and control while maintaining that trust.
You got a great story here for the Institute, boy, to continue pushing out there. Thank you so much, Om. You're a guru. You're an expert. I really appreciate you. Continue on your journeys out there, making things happen.
Thank you so much, David. Pleasure
Talk
talking
to
to
you.
you. Take care.